Great, thank you, James. Hi, everyone. My name is Fred Marchant, and I know you. I'm really delighted and so privileged to be invited to make the introduction of these four poets tonight. And so I'm going to do some thank yous first. First to them for inviting me to do this, for tolerating the idea of me doing it. Thank you. And secondly, to the entire Grolier family, including the Mankini family, and James, you know, your organizational skills are matched only by your warmth. Oh. Thank you. All right. I have prepared notes for readers, but not just for readers, but for extraordinary poets. How can I possibly do them justice, individually or collectively? And I really sweated this out over the weekend. I thought, well, what am I going to do? And at first I thought, oh, I'll do a general broad thing and then just do the facts in between each. It didn't work. And I really had to honor each of these writers individually for their distinct voices. So what I think we'll do is each writer will read for about 15 minutes. I'll do a 2 to 3 minute introduction of each, but they won't, and it'll serve as punctuations between the writers, but it won't be the ordinary introductions. I won't do the entire list of data on publications and whatnot. I've got a little, I invented a small twist. I'll say what it is, rather than no mystery. I just looking at my notes. You know, what I did is I tried to find an excerpt that I loved and tried to find the kind of excerpt that actually could be representative of the whole. And so that's what I've done. And we'll look at some poetry briefly as a way of introduction, also some factual data as well. So let me begin. Oh, and the readers will be in alphabetical order. Let me begin with Jennifer Franklin. Jenny Franklin has published 3 books of poetry, the most recent of which is here in this room, and it came out last month from 4-Way Books. It is titled, If Some God Shakes Your House. God, even as I say the word God, you can hear the book. Her work has been published widely in the best of our literary journals, and for the past decade, she's been the unbelievably effective program director at the Hudson Valley Writers Center. And that's in Sleepy Hollow, New York. And the readings, the workshops, the symposia, the various kinds of activities that she sponsored there have actually turned a sleepy little former train station into a literary powerhouse. Jenny Franklin's poetry is powerful too, but it's a power of a unique sort. Poetry is rife with tragedy, heavy with sorrow, pain, loss. But it is not a poetry of victimhood. It is so much more a poetry of resilience, courage, and affirmed, sustained human connection. She's the mother of a neurodiverse child who has now come of age as a young adult. If Jenny Franklin locates herself anywhere in our world, it is with a sense of a human predicament, a predicament we all know in one way or another. And the image that she uses to capture that predicament is the predicament faced by Antigone in both the Greek myth and especially in Sophocles' play. She refuses to leave the body of her dead brother who's violated, the revolutionary thing. She refuses to let it be unburied as ordered by the king, Creon. And in fact, there's a death penalty associated with it. Antigone knows she will die for this violation. And still, as one might say in our time, she persists. Toward the end of this book, in one of the magnificent prose poems that Jenny Franklin wrote, commemorating the first years of the pandemic, She writes about her predicament. Quote, "My daughter crumbles like a rag doll when she seizes, her heavy body limp in my arms. I watch us from above, our forced and permanent pietà. Can you see the truth? The child isn't the one who is dead." I am haunted by that question. Can you see the truth? Both in the individual and personal way that she means it, but then let's think about it collectively. Can we see the truth? It's our challenge as much as it is hers, and it's somehow hiding inside of every one of the poems in this book, that really burning and painful question. Jenny Franklin's poetry looks squarely at it and tries to see it, and in that way shows us courage and commitment, the kind of commitment it takes to see the truth. Jenny Franklin. Endurance.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Fred. The danger of asking someone like Fred to do your introduction is that you're going to cry when you're reading the poems. Thank you so much, James, for having us here, and thank you to my fellow readers tonight for reading with me. It's such an honor to be here with all of you, and thank you to all the poets in the audience, Mark Lens. So many people here tonight too. Okay, thank you for everyone who's zooming in. So this is the book. It's called If Some God Shakes Your House, and it's just out about 3 weeks ago from Four-Way Books. And I'm going to read some of the prose poems and some of the Antigone poems for you tonight. This one is called As Antigone. I'm not greedy. I will go when I'm led from the city to the tomb. I don't want glory. They have never understood me. It's not a death wish that made me tend to you, my love, even though I knew nothing could save you. I couldn't let go, our legs side by side as we slept, the flowers you lined up in the soil after I picked them. How you wouldn't accept they were dead, that planting them again would not let them bloom. This one is called February. Our long coats are all that separate us from the cold. Halfway around the world, the sky opens to put out wildfires over the carcasses of burned marsupials. We wait for the subway, for the train. My daughter waits for her short yellow bus. It arrives each morning with one sobbing boy. Politicians preen and posture. The air is damp with acquittal. We bend our heads, but not in prayer. Our palms hold small backlit tablets that promise information or escape. Miles north, a student paints a swastika in my old dorm. Another student covers it with a star. Only the dog is calm, sleeping in a circle in her clean fleece bed. Orwell wrote, there was truth and there was untruth. And if you clung to the truth, even against the whole world, you were not mad. I try to put my daughter to sleep on time in her new room. As I read the familiar incantations, flowers climb up the lamp to the ceiling. All the animals have escaped the zoo. I want the story to end there, all of them tucked into the corners of the zookeeper's room, breathing their heavy eucalyptus breath across the night, their fur shining in the moonlight through the blinds. This next one is another prose poem called September. After the hurricane came the hurricane. 3 women willing to ruin their lives. First, there was a heat wave. Then the cold came without warning. We buckled sandals on our feet one day, slipped them into boots the next. Coats hung lonely on the backs of chairs. We whispered the news to each other so the children wouldn't know how angry we were to hear rape called horseplay. Hannah Arendt wrote, in an ever-changing, incomprehensible world, the masses had reached the point where they would, at the same time, believe everything and nothing, think everything was possible and nothing was true. The man I love rarely drinks, yet he is taken to ordering gin. I ask him if he's thinking of Winston Smith. He says he's thinking of getting through the next 2 years. My daughter holds his hand on the way home from the restaurant. The court will rule her rights away. Still we walk in the rain-soaked sidewalks to the lit building by the river. The lights are on for the dog who waits for us in a circle. My girl skips down the wide avenue. For once, I am relieved she cannot read or understand the story on everyone's lips. And this one is called Memento Mori Apple Orchard, and it was first published in Tree Lines Anthology, and 2 of the editors are here tonight, Fred Marchant and Jennifer Barber. So I'm reading this one for you too. And then it was selected to be in the Macmillan Bedford Guide to Introduction to Literature. So it'll be in there for high school students to read. Memento Mori Apple Orchard. In the gold light of early October, we climb the orchard hills, searching empty trees for apples. The boy at the gate tells us Ida Red, Rome, Crispin, and Surprise are all ripe and ready for our hands. We walk and walk. The dog investigates every fallen apple with her frantic nose. Even as we savor this autumn sunlight of our beginning, headlines remind us what is lost. Large families have picked the trees clean, leaving plastic bottles and paper napkins blowing like white flags. Instead of the fragrant apples on the ground, reminding me of my mother's baking, I catch the smell of decay. I catch the smell of decay as we walk through so many rows of stubby trees that we cannot find our way back to the car. We do not say what we're thinking. If we leave without a single apple, it might mean what we have done to the earth cannot be undone. The children who grow up on this imperiled planet will not remember pulling the russet fruit from the branches to bite into its sweet flesh. We see boys throw bruised apples at each other. Still children, they already know what is damaged becomes a weapon. As we pull away, we watch them run the worn paths. Their masks fall as they bend to the ground. Their masks fall as they bend to collect the blemished apples and fill their empty bags. A couple more poems. Fred mentioned Creon. This is the only poem in the book where Creon is mentioned. Creon creates his own truth. It took me years to see the chaos he wanted to create. He brought light to the roses and cut them back to claim the cure. All summer, he set small fires with words, but kept his hands clean. He turned us against each other, as if we were all invasive species in his groomed garden. As we sat under the golden rain tree, I worried the silver moon would incur his wrath for its imperfection. Fear is an addictive drug, and he fits his tight fist around my throat. I hear his lies as lies. My crime is thinking for myself. Hannah Arendt believed forgiveness is the key to freedom. I cannot agree. And the chorus says, you are not wrong about the leader. He lives for performance and propaganda. Memes, mockery, morality will not thwart him. And I'm going to read one more prose poem and 2 short Antigones. This is called February. This has always been the month of death, I tell the dog, as my oldest friend dies on her daughter's birthday. I try not to think of the June evening we ate across from the Acropolis, our last night in Athens. 22 years ago, the only tragedies we knew were those from books we studied in school. We bought the same makeup and sunglasses. So young, we didn't know we didn't need them. My daughter wakes at 4 a.m. from a fever and echoes what I whisper to console her. On my birthday, she's too sick to go to school and sleeps all day. I walk her to the bakery for a croissant and sing in the dark to keep her calm. Beckett wrote, memories are killing. So you must not think of certain things, of those that are dear to you, or rather, you must think of them, for if you don't, there is danger of finding them in your mind, little by little. I let myself think of Georgia as I break from work. I sift through the photo box from grad school, the first wedding in Castoria, the pension in the mountains where the walls were so thin we could hear each other breathe. For years, I was envious of her healthy daughters. After we were both in remission, she drove me to Sonoma for a mud bath. We stood together in the shower, big as a studio, our scars white and jagged as the path we drove in the Peloponnesus to get to the sea. She said we were cured, but I thought we were living on borrowed time. Nobody is ever right about anything. And the last two Antigone poems in the book. As Antigone, I see my hubris. Tulips turn to late winter sky like shelter dogs wanting to go home. I'm waiting, they whisper, while I speak tender words to the dead. Those who cannot speak are most worthy of words. In love with the impossible and certain I am right, I go inside and close the door. I know how to be alone. To be a character in a tragedy, you must be blind to your flaw. I always look at the world from windows. The park, a green canopy, hovers against the blue. In this wind, the unhinged door on the roof across the street opens, bangs shut. And the chorus says, you are nothing more than a lone tulip trying to stand erect in the wild wind. And thank you all for coming. I'm just going to read the last poem in the book called As Antigone. As Antigone, I still want to believe I can find some way to fix you. That if I go back to the beginning, retrace the disaster with the savant detective's obsession, I could uncover a cure. The smartest expert, some successful drug. Better yet, I want the pediatrician to give you a different diagnosis. I want to go back to the walk home past restaurants and playgrounds, autumnal light catching all the auburn in your hair. I want to go back to the moment your father left us outside the cafe. Consider handing you to him, all 47 pounds of you in your gingham pants and hot pink cardigan, Dalmatians decorating the little pockets, and walk away without looking back. But I would never have left, and I won't now. One way or another, you will be the end of me. Inadvertent brute force, vector of virus, constant caretaking, your heavy body forcing my remission's abrupt end. I know what's waiting, as certain as cloth hung to hold my scarred neck. I will not walk away. The moment the nurse pressed your splotched body into my arms, your needs fixed my fate. Constantly confused, your jagged voice requests Christmas songs all spring. You shove words of grace into my dry throat, and I sing. I don't need a bottle of pills, white as sleep, to silence me. Every ersatz saint knows endless sacrifice is suicide. For 20 years, I have been disappearing. Touch me. I am not even here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Jennifer Jean's third book, Whose, presents us with another kind of resilience, another kind of truth-telling, and its own specific kind of courage. Born in California, spending her early years in foster care, Jean came of age in a time and a place in which she was no stranger to turbulence and trauma, and these were not strangers to her either. In fact, one could almost say the story of her coming of age consisted of painstaking work in finding and creating one's own voice, her own voice. That's not so much a metaphor as it is a set of actions, a learning to break silences and shames, and in the process, learning how to create oneself thereby. Finding and creating voice for those silence has informed Jennifer Jean's writing workshop teaching from the beginning, this I know. And she founded a workshop for those suffering from trauma, including sexual abuse and exploitation, and specifically human trafficking. Creating one's own voice is no doubt part of her goal and values in directing 24 Pearl Street, the Fine Art Work Center in Provincetown. It's online program of courses and workshops. Imagining and shaping the voices of the voiceless is a fundamental source of poetry in her book, last year's book, Object Lessons. It's explicitly focused on human trafficking, survival, and beyond survival. Whose? I'm practicing. I listened on Google, and it's over there. You can see it under the computer. Whose is Portuguese for voice. The title is so apt in naming for what is so central to Jean's work overall. In this new book, she invents a name for a new poetic form. She calls it saturation. Right away, even without even knowing what it is, I love it. A saturation form of poetry. She says it's a kind of ekphrastic in which the speaker has an immersive audio experience. Well, in this book, there's a lot of songs that I know, including Fado. So there's that, but then there's one poem in which she just says it's the sound of the Pacific from ages 2 months to 7 years or something like that. The way in which sound becomes part of your life is how I take the word saturation. Sometimes music can surround us, but when it does, sometimes it enters every cell in one's being. Think of it yourself. You're immersed in music when you're at a concert, or you're really inside a good piece of music on your Victrola. Thank you. For me, and I think for many, it's a moment of emotional freedom. The mind wanders. I used to think it was wrong of my mind to wander at a classical music concert until I just said, the hell with it, it wanders. The mind wanders. with the music. And in some way, it is a kind of experience of freedom, freedom for the self, for the soul, for the mind, for whatever you have going on inside of you. It's a kind of dance between the music and you. Some of you know the song Desperado. You should know the Eagles version of it because that's the immersive impetus and inspiration for one of the poems in Vos. And I love this. And forgive me for having some idiosyncrasy too. This is from the poem involving the Eagles' Desperado. I once sang Desperado at a camp and watched people cringe. Cringe when my smooth speaking voice didn't translate. They sucked their teeth on the other side of the fire. Fuck you, I thought. I need this song. And that, it seems to me, is at the core of music in this book and in Jennifer Jean's poetry. She needs this song. And I would say we need this song, Jennifer.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Fred. Wow, I feel so understood. I feel like he peered into my soul and just expressed it. Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you to all my fellow readers and James and the Grolier family. Yeah, so I'm going to read from those. One thing about the saturation poems, it's true. I just invented the term for something that already existed. I didn't invent the thing itself. I know that. One thing about it that I realized is that it's acts, and I just realized this last night, that it acts, those kinds of poems in this book act as a, not a playlist, but a soundtrack for my life. And I think I know I'm not the only one that experienced life like that or experiences life like that, as if there's a soundtrack going on. But I know for me, I always wanted to make it manifest in my poems. And I've read a lot of poetry that seems to do that and to create an epic quality around the stories of a person's life, especially their childhood. And I'm thinking of poets like, the first one that comes to mind when I read Major Jackson's work, he seemed to do that. Like his life sounded epic. And I was like, my life's epic too. How can I make sure, how can I express that? So that's part of what also the saturations are trying to do. So I'm going to read a few of them for you tonight. And the first one mentions Cabo Verde, which is Cape Verde, the islands from which my paternal ancestors are from. And that's towards the end of the poem. And the other thing you need to know is the kind of saturation it is. It's about, or it's inspired by the entire discography of the Doors. All right. So here we go. The Doors of Perception. My father leapt on stage at the Hollywood Bowl to grab drum and cymbal sticks from a star. He wanted to be a star, a door, white. Security thugs dragged him off John Densmore. He saw doors everywhere. He saw doors everywhere at the Whiskey, the Beanery, the Magic Mountain Fest, and in primary colors in Windward, Oakwood, or north of Rose. He wanted to forget war in Venice, to be a door in Venice and face the faux canals. Later, he flew to Paris to pay homage to the door who died with a head of Alexandrian hair. He carried huge pale poppies to the Poet's Corner in the Père Lachaise, to this stranger under a cream coffin door nailed shut. He said, "Break on through." He pulled a poppy from his pocket like a receipt and chased daylight till he landed in LA, saw a wave of white stars rippling on the Pacific on new moon nights when the ever-present rust cloud was blown out to sea. He found a motel room door, particle door, and shut it on all that he owned for 50 years. He lived there, adding up primary colors hour to hour in bliss consciousness, crossing his legs on the bed, letting electric snow hush the TV, hush gunfire and blood. He forgot his father's Cabo Verde and let himself be Italian there, a different kind of Venetian, because who he really was too close, too black. Okay, so I wasn't going to read this one, but Fred mentioned Desperado, so I'm going to go for it. I heard they dumped 96 million black shade balls into some Los Angeles reservoirs where Joe and I fainted our first summer back in Cali. We didn't know we had to drink water. We didn't know every thirst. I was a stupid kid. I thought I knew the Desperado in Desperado. Desperado is a driving song. You keep water in jugs in the trunk so the song doesn't stop when the Chevy overheats on an ocean-bound road in July. It was the song on Santa Monica's carousel when I looked for a daddy on that spinning pier. A pier is like a hand reaching out to sea. And I once sang Desperado at a camp and watched people cringe when my smooth speaking voice didn't translate. They sucked their teeth on the other side of the fire. Fuck you, I thought. I need this song. All the truth I need about my dad is here. The Queen of Spades said so when I was 7. Yes, I drank that Kool-Aid like a shade ball soaking up sun. And now, for the 6th time in history, I sit across from him. I inhale an egg white omelet. I drink glass after glass, which is doing nothing. Watch him eat a burger with a knife and fork. Watch him cast about at an Art Deco pattern behind me. Say, it's like planets. It's like feeling every feeling at once. My trying not to talk about anything important. My thinking I'm alone because Joe isn't here. He's never here. Fuck you, I remember thinking. I want you happy campers to feel me. I must have sounded desperate, dry-mouthed, on stage, unloved. I love my dad, but he can't love me, no matter how much I let him. I love to sing in the shower, like all who are lucky to have one and no voice, as if the pooling water in my throat, the pooling water at my feet, and my desperate arrhythmic stylings are the thirst-quenching Pacific of the Pacific. Ooh. All right, so this next one is combination ekphrastic because it's based on the album cover for the Bob Seger album, Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band album, Against the Wind. And it's also saturation because I was saturated in that song as well as all the Doors and all the Eagles when I was younger. That's the music my mom had on throughout my childhood. So this is set in LA as are, I think all these poems are. All right, Against the Wind. All horses and homeless folk go to the beach when fires rip through California canyons. They run through surf against the wind, away from the flame of the night. When the choke smoke dies, they canter home to campfire stones, tent poles, push carts, hoof brush wire, salt block racks, and spoons, the flats of certain spatulas. Not everything unnatural is gone. In the fortified Getty Museum, St. Martin dividing his cloak with a beggar, the piebald horse, and Van Gogh's irises are safe too. Sometimes I feel less than a work of art, like a horse awash in a wave not ablaze, like I'm home free when the ash is thick on ground I've slept on for months. Sometimes I wait for miles of asters, blue dicks, and desert pincushions for an after-fire superbloom to feel useful, created, though I know that's as unwise as a California breeze after a decade of drought. Really quick, what happens when you open up your voice is you're vulnerable. You know, But what's interesting being here in this room, and I believe what was called in the beginning a sacred space, it just feels okay. So I just want to say thank you before I even continue. So this next poem is also ekphrastic and saturation. It's an ekphrastic because I was fascinated by this photo I saw in Deborah Porter, in her living room. She's a founder of the Boston Book Festival, and I happened to go to her home when I worked for the festival, and it's a huge, huge photo, maybe as big as that entire back wall. And it's a shoreline littered entirely with plastic bottles. Okay, so maybe some of you have seen it before, but it's amazing in a horrible, terrible way, but amazing. It just stuck with me. And I was thinking about that, about how we have choices in our lives when it comes to anything, anything we encounter in our lives, but also as humanity, we have choices how we can deal with the various things that we create as humans, the horribleness that we create, the good things we create. We have choices. So that's essentially what this poem is about. And the saturation portion is that it's infused with the song "We Will Rock You" by Queen, and it has to be the version that is followed by "We Are the Champions." Okay, not the other version, but it has to be the combo version. Keep that in mind. All right. Hermosa Beach. As the Pacific choked on plastic from shore to shore, began the unseen start of Chris Jordan's ghastly photo of a gajillion water bottles outside the cycle of life, not dissolving, not giving back. To dissolve, to give back, they'd be made of agar, algae, or sugarcane. As the sea filled up, how did I know the joy of giving joy when I'm hungry, when I'm fresh out of foster care? I mean, we shared our shoulder knob, butt cheek, distended tummy burn lines on the Buccaneer camp bus pulling out of Hermosa. My lunchless stomach grumbling under a weird strip of red, but Marlene was burnt worse, and she'd welt overnight. So I pointed to a surfer on the shore side of PCH, whose towel dropped below his ass, yelled, "Full moon flash," which made her giggle like mad, which made me cackle like crazy. We rolled off the chalkboard leather seat, then boys behind us caught the wave, then big kids in the back, then the bus load of us, then the busload chanted, "We will," with stomp, stomp, claps, as the Pacific filled with a gajillion unwinging bodies. I knew joy between a certain second stomp and a certain cup palm clap, as the sea darkened to our right. I mean, you don't have a map, and one off-ramp leads your bus to that Jordan bottle photo, another to waters without waste, another and you're 9 forever poking at the pain, another has you empty-bellied laughing with a friend. Okay, just 2 more. This one is saturation based on Joni Mitchell's song "California." That song I listen to more than any other song. I have to say, that's just right in my DNA right now. Okay. California. Climbing a stone flight in downtown Lisboa, I dodged the disquiet family begging on Rua Garrett with their rehearsed moans, with their smiling smoke breaks in the alley by the Paraquia dos Martias. I had seen them, and they'd seen me too, posing the week before in a chair at the Café a Brasileira with the bronze of Pessoa. They nodded, shuffled past. Then my alma immortal sat so straight, I knew my chair held the body that housed my home. I felt like a queen crab, like California, home. Like there are no strangers in this world. Like meeting Marian Mosam at the International in Dubai, linking arms on a water taxi. We owned no grips or rails or walls between us and the Arabian Sea. She was gorgeous in a magenta turban and jeweled collar pendant. She explained the pelvic benefits of a squat latrine as our skiff surfed along to the souk. As I held myself up with my own core, I nestled into that night like a foundation stone, like buying my ticket to Seoul, catching a train to Chunshim Lake, going to a party up a red dirt road on Sunun Hill above a cold autumn fog. There were lots of seeking people there, reading shadows on the cumulus, reading sunset rays over the temples below. I faced east, found I ached like home, and I became the state of California, like a planked pier leaning over the Pacific, or a twilit Ferris wheel there, elevating friends in a gently vertical turn. Like me, they hovered a little above the land, and a breeze made all our eyes water. And then this is last one. Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, thank you. All right, so this is not a saturation, actually. This is just a poem. No, this is just it's the other underlining thread of this book, and just an obsession of mine, that the creative impulse is what we have that can save the world in general. I think that was also said in the beginning too, that poetry can save the world. I think it's that creative impulse that's in everyone, but definitely here with everyone here. Okay, this is Inspiration Point. We'd stare at horses at Will Rogers Park, then hike the loop trail to Inspiration Point, and I'd lag back to be a kid, alone. And under that aloofness hid vengeance, the salt dripping through chaparral brows into my brown lashes. And under that, anxiety, rusty burr or two in my left sneaker. And under that, rage, a perfectly purple shell some kid favored and lost. And under that, hope, the pounded ground. And under that, a vast clearing on the cosmos, also called Inspiration Point. A gorgeous inner hill with a curious figure taking in the Pacific view, breathing chicory and chamise, naming every wind border near Catalina Island. That high noon, far-sighted figure seemed a bit burnt but warm, a bit divine. But sometimes I didn't find that figure wowing at a thing no one had ever seen. At a new bird better than a phoenix. There's something better than a phoenix. Sometimes my hand stretched towards some nether new creation, and I was the figure who named it. Thank you.
It'd be pretty weird if we just tried to reminisce about how I've known some writers for some years for this or that reason. But this is not only reminiscing. Dzvinia and I have been friends since the mid-1980s. And we met through Oskol Melnichuk. And the great Oskol Melnichuk, the great friend of writers, and the great person who understood the international dimension of this work that we were doing. And I will say in a very personal way that Oskol Dzvinia introduced me, and still introduced me, to Ukrainian culture, poetry, especially poetry. And just as an accident, I was just reminiscing privately just then and thinking, oh yeah, that's right. And you've also translated Halyna Kruk, one of the great poets of our time, our contemporary, and in relation to the war. And I've treasured her poetry and your translation. It takes away my opening sentence about Ukrainian culture being important to your work. However, the author of 6 collections of her own poetry, Dzvinia is an editor, a teacher, a translator, and a literary figure who has always drawn strength and mystery from the inheritance of her Ukrainian culture, the history, the family stories, in a very formal way, the transgenerational transmission of trauma, of the inheritance of suffering. That culture then includes learning a bloody history, the horrific losses of life and limb and wealth and starvation, the violence of World War II, the violence of the post-World War II, There's a large canvas in the background of Dzvinia Orlowsky's poetry. And yet, paradoxically, her poetry feels very intimate, very focused, a real magnifying glass. Oh, it's a close-up. That's better than a film close-up. Take, for instance, the opening poem in her book, her 2018 book, Bad Harvest. It's called Playing Opossum. It's a prose poem in which the speaker's father is determined not to be conscripted into one of the conquering armies. He asks his wife to jump from a table onto his extended leg between two chairs so as to break the leg and thus keep him from being conscripted. That act of resistance ends on these words. The leg doesn't break. He rolls away from her, screaming, holds his hand up as if to strike the air. Hysterical, she sobs through his curses. Forgiving her slight body, he slowly closes his hand, lowers it over his heart. At the end of the poem. I love that moment. It's almost like a secret. We're seeing into the secret life of this family, of these people. I love the non-heroic stance, the poor person's skepticism of the great institutions of war and militarism. I love the attention the poet gives to the hand over the heart. I continue to this moment, continue to wonder and imagine what he is thinking in that gesture at that moment. What characterizes Dzvinia Orlowsky's poetry is her willingness, her artistic willingness to stay with that image or narrative long enough until the heart is touched, and not just inside the poem, but in the reader. In her witty and ironic poems, sometimes coming of age as a young American woman, she also, however, preserves this same intimacy and close-up feeling of how to stay with the story. And so we stay with the story with Dzvinia.
Wow. We're surviving, Fred, your introductions. This is so kind of I want to thank the Grolier family, my fellow readers, Fred. This is such an amazing moment. This is a sacred moment for many of us, and this is a sacred place. I just a bit of history. I did my first book signing here in 1994. And at that time, my son was 2 years old, holding my hand and also wearing, I believe, a black wool beret, as his parents were at that time. And my daughter was 1 year old, and I was holding her on my hip when I wasn't signing or reading. And another great event, just 3 years prior to 1991, Ukraine had declared their independence and was starting to move on very, very delicate steps to keep that independence. So fast forward, my son obviously is older and is moving to Boston by the end of the summer. And my daughter is here in the audience, and I will not have her on my hip. And Ukraine is still fighting for its independence. Ластівки. Остання спроба долетіти деш, із чого курника цієї стайні. Цієї спайні не вивчать нагайні, когані запахи травинного гнізда. Туди до пещених небес, де мов підніжжя дроти електричні, і де веселкі змаги феєричні, спасичні втіхи бідного життя. Як рукавички чорні з наших перст, мов чорні і білі клавіші руальні, як феєверки вночі фестивальні, вони летять із рідного міста. Вони вже там, невидимі, як безкінечний звук кінечного бездоні, такі відважні і такі голодні, самотні злети нашого життя. Swallows. A last attempt to fly off somewhere from this coop, from this stable, from this bedroom where the urgent sweet smells of an animal's nest hang there to there. To caress heavens touched where electrical wires are like a pedestal and the fiery strokes of a rainbow, the unsettled comforts of a poor life. The black mittens from our fingers, like the black and white keys of a piano, like festival fireworks at night, they fly from their native nest. They're already there, invisible, like the endless sound of the final abyss, so fearless and so cold, the solitary flights of our lives. That poem is by Natalka Bielitsa-Kiewicz, who my wonderful co-translator, Ali Kinsella, and I translated into a collection we called Eccentric Days of Hope and Sorrow. And just briefly, Natalka is a Kyiv-based writer who whose work became kind of a literary hallmark in the late Soviet and early independent years, but she continues to be very influential, and her work is known primarily for its lyricism and the power of dark despair. And I'll read one more. Knife. A knife to slice bread. A knife to carve a whistle. A knife to finish killing the lamb wounded by the wolf. So naked, dry, and lean, the clean surface of fish foams with sweat in Sabbath day broth, a sign of mercy and tears. Don't touch it without a blessing. This knife is music that kills. These aren't just words, they're poetry without words, where grass washes heaven's blade. I'm going to read now two poems from Bad Harvest. Fred, thank you for referencing that prose poem. It amazed me when Putin was trying to get his draft going that people were attempting to break their legs, and I thought it's just extraordinary that history does repeat itself. This one is called Invisible Departures. And it's for internally displaced persons, Crimea, 2015. How long before choosing to kiss an angel's hand, to reach for heaven's fruit-bearing boughs, the bee not disturbed, too drunk? How swollen the seeds of heavy-headed sunflowers that bow along the glass road leading from home? How silent the instrument that comes down like a hammer on someone leaving someplace left. A tonal switch here. What you mentioned, getting up close and personal. I think this one does it. And I actually read this poem the last time I read here many years ago, and it's in the anthology. Gosh, I'm blanking out because I'm so excited and nervous. Nasty Women Poets. So this is called Pussy Riot, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Pussy Riot, want, don't want. I thought you were a catchphrase for the not tonight, oh yes, tonight, but not 2 nights in a row of late middle age. How else to say it? The thatched roofs are on fire, and the villagers have fled, except this woman whom you left behind, her skirt rising in flames, wild heat, a wreckage of KY and oil of Olay. Oh, graying, fraying, housebound hive, you're not my problem, though I will admit your spreading reflection in the handheld mirror looks this year, don't make me say it, wiser, if not for love or song. Can a finger dip into honey in late January? Can red wine stream like blood down my legs? That afternoon, huddled against the cutting winter wind in front of the Boston State House, we protested. Putin must go. Yanukovych is a cesspool. While you, prison punk prayer, turn the world's attention to holy hooliganism. I thought you were a catchphrase for the want, don't want of middle age. Oh, pussy, what a riot. I had you all wrong. My secrets, it's like my gum and my blank checks. Okay, I'm flipping the script here again. I have a new collection coming out. I just received a notice from Carnegie Mellon. Next year, those absences now closes. And there's a section in there that's inspired by the great Ukrainian, late 20th century Ukrainian filmmaker, screenwriter, and literary stylist, Alexander Dovzhenko. And I translated a novella of his called The Enchanted Desna, and very much was taken by his folkloric themes and the way that he describes his love for rural Ukraine. So I wanted to revisit it, but through the lens in a time of Putin, but retaining folkloric elements. So these poems are from that sequence. And this one, the address, I guess is, not I guess, it is toward Putin. It's called Desolate. He had no soul, only steam. No eyes, only 2 frying pans. No mouth, only a daub of red. No throat, only a chimney that choked him. No God, only a candle placed upside down. He had no voice, only a whip handle. No skin, only a sheepskin turned inside out. No feet, only puddles in which dirt swirled. No conscience, only pigeons spying from above. He had no will, only a cracked watermelon, seeds instead of memories. No woods, only withered grass. No roar, only labored horses and buckling calves. No bread, only one bowed fruitless tree. He had no angels, only the din of buzzing bees. He had no road to cross, no country, only a stinging nettle. No sins, only a thunder of artillery. No soldiers, only tongues over fire. No children, only an insurrection of flowers. No legs, though at times they ran like rivers of blood. The village crow. The village crow knew everything. Whose son fathered young partisans, guns like large broken wishbones pressed to their chests. Which rooster crowed, "Get up," confusing death with daily rising. Which neighbor's hatchet would outlive him. Water is the enemy. Some claimed the crow was older than the oldest oak. Others swore it was brought by the devil one year to act as interpreter for blasphemers, sleepwalkers, and arsonists. No one cared about angels anymore. The crow had special tricks. Before a hunter lifted his rifle, blasted the bird into a comet of feathers, it would bring down enough rain to spoil the hay. When it cawed, the lake grew quiet. Clouds darkened the sky, covering the water's surface. Fish presumed their days were numbered, hiding among swampy drapes. But even fishermen, before casting their lines, removed their hats and cried out in disbelief, "Does anyone recognize me?" I'm going to read 3 more. This one is inspired by a painting by the Romanian artist Elena Maria Cajal, and is from a collaborative writing ekphrastic project titled Symbolic Gesture, Shattered Symbolic Gesture in Solidarity with Ukraine. So this one is called Breaking News. 1. What breaks one person revives another. What breaks into silence breaks through to eternity. But what if heaven is bombed and clouds no longer diaphanous split like dried earth and crumble into dust, mortal as family? What war? The soil is well drained for peonies whose only passion is to be unforgettable red. The hummingbird moth wishes for clover, the skin on your ankle for a blade of grass to sweep against it. What war? The sky has plenty of room. Petitions buzz like bees or lift into kites if you run fast enough, pull hard against the winds. 7 months in, no one reports the bombings anymore. What war? Silence. Imagine that. Imagine 3 birds at night calling out to their mates, I made it, I'm still here. In the meantime, a woman lies trapped under the rubble of a 9-story building. Everyone's praying she's still alive. Prayer is hope. But what is hope other than guesswork? And guesswork is the surefire way not to get to heaven. Be willing to be broken. Okay, these last 2. This is a definite shift, but I wanted to read it. I want to thank Jennifer and Mom Aid Review and for taking this poem. There was an issue called Good Mom or Bad Mom, which I just really, that's so intriguing. So it's called Our Dolls Were Naked. Our dolls were naked, but our cats stayed partly clothed. A ribbon here, a brown felt hat there, 2 holes cut and fitted for their ears. My sister and I wanted them pretty for when the priest came to dinner. They knew in the hallway, plunk heavy onto their sides. We waited for the priest to remove his hat, smile, extend his cool hand to touch our faces in approval like Christ to his believers. Instead, he murmured that we were cruel and headed straight for hell. This is all true. My sister's baby doll was large, shiny, round face. Mine was narrow, loose-limbed, rubbery. It peed rust when I squeezed its belly. The cat's clawed, scratched, refused to be babies. Like all bad mothers, we grew sharper teeth, longer noses, and learned how to change the color of our eyes. Frightened of us, our dolls suffered from stomach aches, lay prone on the brick walkway until we took them to the faceless doctor who administered lilac water jabs to the soles of their feet. Shushing them, we brushed invisible strands of hair from their faces. The cats rarely got sick. Lifting them by the armpits, we reassured them they had enough heft to eclipse the sun. The cats celebrated their 9 lives. We worried that they'd stop needing us, and how we missed hugging our dolls. But the dolls, too, wanted no part of us, playing hide and seek in every darkened room we couldn't even imagine. And carrying on the theme of soundtracks, I'm going to end with this, and I can't sing, but I will attempt to. Because I'm not going to look at you because I'm going to die. But anyway, so this is called Back in the USSR. That's McCartney. 1. We weren't the Beach Boys California girls, weren't the cutest in the world, no French bikinis cut to our McDonald's and Coca-Cola bodies. We bit eyes and a mouth into bologna slices, laid the cool skin masks against our faces, sprayed sun in on our ash blonde hair until it streaked bright yellow, a signature look, free, almost graffitied like yellow snow. Once I surfed Lake Erie to my sister's cheers, stood up on a rental board, balancing for a minute, the tiny wave beneath me lifting and curling just long enough to make it count, though I'm not sure what for. Oh, Maria, Chris, Noonie, Natalie, even our theme park tissue flower power blooms held seductively against our hips. Oh, steamy dance halls in the dark and never sparked a glance from any boy. 2. So we swore we'd end up marrying each other. Exchange vows with dyed good luck rabbit's feet, keychains for keys we'd most likely never own, doors that opened to beauty queens who waved from county fair floats pulled by tractors. Then Paul McCartney sang it. The Ukraine girls really knocked me up. What? They leave the West behind. Really? Back in the USSR, the USSR. Our popularity was sealed. We began waiting by our phones. 3. We didn't appreciate irony back then, and keep your comrades warm. My father's heated over my dead body. Let me hear your balalaikas ringing out. No patriotic Ukrainian plays a Russian balalaika. But the Ukraine girls knocked somebody out. Soon we too would be called to ecstasy, snow-peaked mountains. Honey, disconnect the phones. How exciting at night to rub bright purple rabbit fur against our faces, gently pressed to our lips the tips of crescent nails. We wallowed in the luck we believed we'd continue to bring, they'd continue to bring. Useless, sad, saturated relics dangling from small chains.
But mea culpa. I made a mistake. I was trying to sort of put the data of the writer's work in different places of what I was saying, and I had Dzvinia's at the end to say that she teaches at Providence College, or does teach in the Solstice workshops and is a contributing editor at Solstice magazine. But that's not the mea culpa part. The mea culpa part involves the translation of and when Dzvinia didn't say this, and so this is really worth our moment, okay, of saying it. The translation of Natalka Blitz-Shevkevitz was a finalist for the Griffin International Poetry Award of Prize. We know it was one of the most distinguished in the world. It was also won the Derek Walcott Poetry Prize and won the AITA Alta. Oh, it's Alta. On my typo, national translation, and it also won the AAUS, the American Association of Ukrainian Studies Award. This is a really important translation, an important poet, and an important set of translators who have worked. So thank you.
Thank you.
For that. Oh, I need another prop. I need a copy of Manny Pluto's The Deepest Part of Dark. Anyone got one handed? Yeah. It's actually in my briefcase, but it's buried back in way back. Let's all just take a look for a second at this cover. It's haunting. I don't know what it is. I think it's a snow globe, but maybe it isn't, because there's all sorts of things going on inside it that don't have, they're not church steeples and things like that. There's a person in there. It makes me think. And every time I looked at it, it is unfailing. I said, Dad, that's an image of the well of souls. Oh, thank you. Thank you, James. See, James, his decency and cordiality. Thank you, James. The image to me, and reading the book, confirms this image. It's like the well of souls in the Odyssey, when Odysseus digs a hole and sees the underworld, the afterlife, and the spirits of the dead gather around it, come to it. They want to talk. He wants to talk to them. He doesn't know his mother's passed away. Tries to hug her and realizes, oh, Jesus, she's the ghost. And that cover, to me, works in a similar way. Any Pluto's poetry is a conjuring of the dead, a conjuring of them to life, and a kind of going toward them as well. There is a kind of speaking to and speaking with. In Unnatural Acts poem, Amy Pluto writes of a journey. It could be imaginary, it could be literal. I'm not asking. To the grave of great, great, great grandfather, Marchant.
I can't read.
Once there, she digs through snow and ice and brings the body to life, strange life, by kissing it on the teeth. And she breathes air into it, bears air, frost into your suit, it swells. Flesh of the man who made, the man who made, the man who made the woman, who gave the child a heart to see the dead through dreams. If one hears an echo of Hamlet in that moment, in this memento mori, it's not an accident. Annie Pluto is a poet and a theater person, a teacher of literature and theater at Leicester University and in the world beyond, far beyond. She's one of the founders of the Oxford Street Players. She's in Shakespeare and Company, and I think in the Worcester Shakespeare Group. The deepest part of dark, and by the way, I love this title so much. The fact that she dropped the from dark is so much to the point of this poetry. The deepest part of dark is her fifth collection of poetry, and we hear in it, in this poem and throughout this book, the darkness and concomitant sadness that comes but does not overwhelm, but instead inspires. Thank you, Annie.
Does that work? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Scary. Thank you, Fred. That was amazing. And thank you to the Grolier family. It's such an honor to be here. I'm looking at my former teacher, Bob Creeley, on the wall. If I can conjure up Bob Creeley to be here, that would be fabulous. And to my fellow readers, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm just so moved. After that intro, I don't know, should I read about raising the grandfather up from the dead? Maybe. But I think we'll start with something softer. Dzvinia, I was so upset with that song back in the USSR because there was nothing about Belarus girls. And my father also was like, comrade, over my dead body, comrade. Comrade, no comrades, no, yet. All right, so I'm going to start with a poem from the West. And this is called Lords of the Wichita. And this is for my sister-in-law, Teresa. So Teresa, if you're out there in Zoom land, this is for you. High grass to winter wheat, eastern horizon ending in pinpoint precision. On the Great Plains, after Christmas, the buffalo come to feed. In the morning, stumbling forward, nostrils flared in the weak winter sunlight. We search for them in the Wichita Mountain Preserve. Wild longhorn cattle graze in dry pastures. Subtle noses find what tastes best. Spotted hides and painted markings, calves stray close to their mamas, and all is still. Hawks on treetops perched, a lonely life of watching time. Deer bed down to catch the high noon overhead. Prairie dogs protected too in the Wichita, peeking out at passersby. in the trees, hidden, a longhorn bull chews patiently, grown into his great beauty, waiting as the cow eats. He has all the time in the world for her, and they will make another spotted calf next spring. The buffalo leave a trail, wet patties to trace the course of their long protected walk. We find them, a phalanx of 5, heads tilted west as the wind stirs the great prairie, giant as boulders, easily mistaken for gods. So that's the landscape my husband came from. He was born in Lubbock, Texas, and then grew up in Lubbock and in Moore, Oklahoma, and in the Wichita and many other fabulous places. And he passed away in January of 2022. He was in home hospice care for 5 months. So I'm going to read some poems that come out of that. This one's called Chess. There is no playbook for the dead, the dying, the caretakers, the family. Hospice provides a map. Drugs arrive delivered. Nurses, chaplains, social workers, volunteers, contraptions, beds that breathe throughout the day and night. Oxygen that becomes a lullaby. Sheets of paper to keep score. Morphine 4, patient 0. Haldol 5, patient 0. Syringes filled to the correct line, gently insert in the inside of his cheek. That didn't hurt until the end. We'd play chess, the set that arrived from Istanbul. I always play for Salah ad-Din, you for Richard and his Templars. I walk you through every move. I let you win. And then the knights, the pawns, the queens, the rooks, the imams and bishops, the king and sultan get put away. I have not opened them since that day. It hurts to see them in their splendor. This one's called Hush Puppy. I stop taking notes when hospice arrives, and the notebook in my purse becomes a scratch pad for shopping lists, for restaurant menus. Shaken seafood does not have fried okra, no matter how many times I ask. No red beans. No, we are not in Texas. They do have a fried catfish basket with French fries, onion rings, and hush puppies. The dog under the bed listens to the undulating sound of the mattress. Your weight shifts in the night of disturbed sleep. In the beginning, there is only the TV that I turn off once you are sound asleep. Hush. Dog in bed. Your death was easier in winter. The dog still alive, my constant companion, learning to navigate the world with only his right eye. I had to bring myself completely to the table, the one where I hand fed him on the kitchen floor, disguising medications to look and taste like treats. He was brave. The cold January afternoon when you died, he sat next to me, suspended, the pewter silence of the new year pressing in my throat. The hospice nurse came to fill out papers, and the funeral director sent 2 young men. They were late. It was a good day for death, and we waited, warped in silence. When they came, the dog walked to the fence and led them in patiently, sitting by the hospital bed. Your sheet became a shroud. They lifted your washed and broken body onto a gurney. The dog watched. They zipped and once again led them out to the gate. I turned off the bed, the mattress deflating, the snake-like hissing at its unnatural end. All is silence. That night, I still slept on the couch. I had forgotten how to use a bed. And this will be the last one in that series. This is called El Paso. And these are all going to appear in my forthcoming book in the fall from Lily Poetry Review called How Many Miles to Babylon? So this one's called El Paso. I thought, perhaps you were here. The house so dark that even the dead could find their way back. How is it that you are gone? I tried to find the portal hole in the sky that would open so you could lift from your broken body and touch the gate where those ponies lost in childhood to accidental deaths were whole and grazing, lifting their magnificent heads and waiting. And you, a child in a big hat and silver spurs with jingle bobs that rake and sing the pasture, the trail you leave behind, the wolf moon beckoning forward, the house silent, the dog finally at rest. The winter, this winter, and you in that pasture, tenderly putting your face in the neck of your first pony, the paint horse from El Paso. Everything is made holy again. So that was January, and then we all know what happened later. Putin decided it was a good idea to go to the Ukraine. So I, my family is Belarusian, but I did my DNA, and I actually start in the indigenous east of Russia and go all the way to Poland. So who the hell knows like where those Tatars went? They're in my mother's family. And there's some Ukrainian in there too, I found. Anyway, so while I was watching this, I was horrified. I would weep every night. And, this went on. I'd watch CNN till 1 a.m. And then, of course, Uvalde happened. And all of a sudden, we weren't watching Ukraine till 1 a.m. So these are a few poems about that. And this one's called Slava Bogu, which means glory to God. Red leather boots, embroidered houses, flower crowns, and fairy tale houses. Forest deep with wolves and witches. Snow sinks silent into holes of foxes and rabbits. Invaders from the east kill the men, pick off the women one by one to ride and ride and ride. The fastest horses on earth can only go so far. Centuries later, this is all a mystery. And golden domes rise to the defenders, our blood mixed and hot. Old wounds bound in stained linen, brick red Easter eggs in crystal dishes. Defend the defenders. Glory to the defenders. Glory to the city. Glory to God in the highest. And then, I like to look at saints. So there is a saint in the Ukrainian Orthodox Church named Saint Olga. It's also my auntie's name. So this is about Saint Olga. So Saint Olga's stained linen. The Mongol hordes destroyed her tomb. She was a woman, after all, and not worth the veneration of her memory. She was a woman in a brass crown and covered hair, who watched her husband pulled apart by horses. No one should witness a death so terrible the earth was soaked with blood. The widow left to put his body back together. She couldn't make him Lord of the dead. She could not make him Christ to rise with dread. She became the saint of defiance and vengeance instead. And then, I would read the New York Times. So this shows up there. I'm going to read you a snippet of the article, and then there's my poem. And this is very telling because in the Orthodox Church, this is Holy Week, and Russian and Ukrainian and several other Orthodox faiths, Easter will be this Sunday. So in this poem, it's called In My Church, Mary Wears Red. And thank you, Jen, because Mom Meg has taken this poem and will be coming out soon. All right. So this is a snippet from the Times. The Moscow Patriarch has repeatedly bestowed blessings on the Russian military, giving a historical golden icon of the Virgin Mary to a senior commander. For example, and casting the war as a holy struggle to protect Russia from what he called Western scourges like gay pride parades. He has been a vocal supporter of President Vladimir Putin, with the church receiving vast financial resources in return. And that's Neil McFarquhar and Sophie Kishovsky. And that was April 18th, 2022. So here's my poem. Let's take her out of the picture, out of the historical frame where she wouldn't stand for being in the pocket of a general scourge, the cold Eastern blame of the West. She sees the exchange of gold and gems, what those who do not have eternal life see fit to deal with. Let's take her out of this picture. She's left on a train to the sea. She's standing in the graves found in Bucha. She's wandering in the steel plant in Mariupol. This Holy Week, this Passover feast, this month of fasting, she's covering her hair, her face. She's opening her hands and reading the central list of the dead. She's stepping into the Chornaya Mora, swimming mermaid-like, her red garments, trailing the fishes and every broken mother's wishes to pull the dead sailors to shore in militias, to show their weeping mothers, their blinded criminal country, the cost of lies, the cost of lives. And she rises, Venus-like from the sea, Stella Maris, Theotokos, mother of Jesus, announcing the resurrection in this, the cruelest month of the year. And I want to follow that with a poem that I like to read. This is about my father. So my father he's Belarusian, but after the First World War, they're part of it was Russia, Imperial Russia, became Poland. So my father served in the Polish army, and then he was a prisoner of war in the Soviet prisoner of war camp. And the fact that he was Belarus, was a blacksmith, was Russian Orthodox, blah, 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 might have saved his life. But this poem is for him. So it's called I Have Been to Samarkand for my father. 2 years ago, May now, as you made yourself ready for death, I wanted to remain, relieve her of her duty, and be a good daughter. You sent me home to die with her alone. I have been to Samarkand, that final time, a journey by water, the dream geography more full than life, the mosque, the church, the covered women singing, stations of the cross, the goblin boat to take me back by morning. I travel by train north and walk to the park. It's hot and burning. to see the icons at the Met, to look into the eyes of each and every opalescent virgin in the house of the Father. She guides the souls in comfort to Samara. Her eyes follow me. At home, I present you a gift, war traveler who prayed at every house of the Father. Saint Sophia's in Kiev, the Friday Mosque of Tashkent, the Bukharian synagogue on Sepnoya Street, the tomb of the prophet Daniel, where his stolen bones grow the steps along the bloody way. In Iran, Iraq, in Syria, then Lebanon, in Egypt and Palestine, Bethlehem at the Church of the Nativity, where the Ottoman Turks had made the doorways 4 feet high to keep the wild horsemen out. To Jerusalem, where they meet God as three, a trinity of one almighty city to destroy the houses of the Father, a caravanserai on the journey backwards to Samara. He put messages in the wall, went to the Holy Sepulchre, and stumbled along the Via Dolorosa, saw the dome of the rock where Muhammad rode a winged stallion to heaven. Across the Mediterranean, in Monte Cassino, you protected the mountain, then the monastery, and in Rome lifted your face to the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Now hear the word of God as the pain goes through you like hot lead, as your bones move lengthwise into sleep along the bed. I have brought you your last book, in prescience and redemption, in secret and in silence. Open it alone. Look, study the compassionate face of Mary, the distant face of Christ, the icons we cannot escape, imprinted on us since baptism. I hear you pray, and I pray too, for your life that spanned the century. Let the light hold fast. Enter Hagia Sophia, the final house of the Father. Go then, backwards to Samara, with your shoes at the door. See Christ, who never was removed before your destiny is achieved. Explore. Arise and go, Vladimir, for the kingdom of heaven is upon you. Just have one more. That's what happens when you go out of order. No, my pages were there. The hell is it? Okay. All right, so this, I'm going to end with a love poem, one that took me 50 years to write. This one's called Wolf Masters of the Birch Bark and Dugout Canoe. The Mohegans called themselves Mahingan, wolf, masters of the birch bark and dugout canoe. You drowned in Lake Wanamog. 50 hot Junes have burned since then. Water of memory, you settle under the sediment, an epileptic seizure in surprise struggle into the pond silt. Fishes and turtles, your ancestors first named and knew by heart. The strong swimmer, you could not save yourself. Your mother's youngest son, having learned too much bad behavior from your band of handsome older brothers, teenage swagger, your hand in mine, fireman's carnival, the sky lit up by Ferris wheel lights and swinging buckets, powdered sugar on our lips. You kiss me on the midway. It's our second season. A time flies without listening. The band is playing a country song. and you are the master of keeping time. I've only borrowed. You live in town, me on a farm for the summer. Only the night moves in perfect phases of the moon. How you cherish joy in tiny moments. The last time we kissed in the forest high above the farm, we lie in pine needles entwined. I'm wearing cousin Tina's red flower print blouse and cowgirl jeans. The clouds perfect the pattern. Brain my body awake, your wolf chemistry in my virgin dreams. Watching you rise from the water and board the birch bark canoe. Paddle in the silent distance to the Naugatuck, where I have walked 50 years backwards to catch your heart. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming tonight. First, let's give Brad a round of applause for some wonderful introductions. Let's give a round of applause to the 4 wonderful poets who shared their work with us tonight. Thank you. We have some books for sale. The poets will be signing books. Thank you all for coming. If everyone could please move your chairs up against the wall, I would be grateful. Thank you for having. Thanks for coming.
Here to sign.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're always there.
Taking the picture, I have to stand up first and let you.
Well, we haven't started, so.
I'd love to see that. To the archives.
I got it.
All right, spots.
Yeah.
I get rushed out. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Full house.
Yes.
I'm excited to come here.